David, you and I were just watching Donald Trump get onto the plane, onto Air Force One, and we noticed he touches the outside of the plane, doesn't he? Which you do as well.
I do.
What's that about?
I'm not sure, but I'm told James Matthews does it too. So perhaps the Scots and the Irish are more superstitious.
Anyway, I'm Mark Stone.
And I'm David Blevins.
And it's Friday, the 4th of July, Independence Day for America, day 165 of Donald Trump's second term. And on Trump 100 today, the bill that will turn the country into a rocket ship. The president's own words after his big, beautiful bill was passed and will now be signed into law.
Success at home, still seeking it abroad. Putin was on the phone to Trump today, and former Hamas hostage Eden Alexander was with him in the White House. We'll bring you the latest.
So, David, more gravitas, more power. That's how the president himself has described how things are going. And it has to be said, the president is on a bit of a roll, isn't he? He's had a good fortnight. The NATO meeting in The Hague, that feels like an age ago now, only a couple of weeks ago. That went really well for him. Iran, that mini war seems now to be calm. The Iranians even telling our own Dominic Waghorn, who is in Tehran, that they're willing to talk to the Americans. So there you go, another big win for Donald Trump, short-term win certainly. And then domestically, the Supreme Court win for Trump, making it harder for judges to block his agenda. Big win there. The markets are doing well. Immigration numbers are low. Great for Trump, of course. His methods are causing huge controversy, but he doesn't care about that. And then job numbers over the past 24 hours, they're good as well. 147,000 jobs added in June, beating analysts' expectations. Unemployment down to 4.1%. All of it together, it kind of feels like, you know, the vibe in the White House in the West Wing, I reckon they must be feeling pretty buoyant. And then, of course, add to that the big, beautiful bill, the tightest of wins, 218 votes to 214, but a huge win nonetheless.
The yeas are 218, the nays are 214. The motion is adopted.
No shortage of jeopardy. The Republican Party staved off a revolt overnight. The votes weren't there at one point, Mark, due to the concerns we've talked about all week. Concerns about access to health care and the rise in the national debt. Donald Trump posted late on Wednesday night to say the final vote was going to happen soon. In fact, we were primed to update yesterday's episode at the last minute. But no, it took all night. And that was much to Donald Trump's dismay. At the time, he ranted on Truth Social, largest tax cuts in history and a booming economy. What are the Republicans waiting for? What are you trying to prove? MAGA is not happy and it's costing you votes.
But they got it across the line. There were some fascinating scenes on Capitol Hill, some of the Congress people voting as quickly as they could so that they could then rush to the airport, get on their flights to get away to wherever they are from across the country for Independence Day. You know, watching it all play out, it kind of just reiterates how some of those concerned Republicans have kind of been hauled over the coals on this one. Donald Trump wields so much power over this Republican Party, and many of them have reservations about the bill. Some of them certainly have reservations about the bill, but they ended up voting for it anyway. Of course, he doesn't have control over Hakeem Jeffries. He is the Democratic minority leader. He delayed everything when he gave a record-breaking speech. He spoke for 8 hours and 44 minutes, the longest speech on the floor of the House in history.
Press on for the left behind. Press on for the rule of law. Press on for the American way of life. Press on for democracy. We're going to press on until victory is won. I yield back.
So there we are, the end of Hakeem Jeffries' long speech. But, you know, victory feels a long way away now for the Democrats. This is a big victory for Donald Trump.
Yeah, party in the USA will be blasting from the speakers on the lawn at the White House on the 4th of July. They're celebrating big time. Donald Trump is in one of the most powerful positions for generations with his control of Congress and over the Republican Party. We heard Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, telling us how they didn't want to waste that unique opportunity, and the sheer size of this bill means they truly can supercharge things like immigration policy and tax plans, even things that are controversial for many people.
Yeah, it's astonishing to think that this was once a Republican Party so hugely skeptical of Donald Trump. But at the beginning of Biden's single term, Donald Trump was in the wilderness. You know, he went back to Mar-a-Lago. He was kind of exiled. He was never going to be back. The Republicans had moved on. But how much has changed? You know, many of those middle-of-the-road Republicans never could have brought themselves to back him publicly. But now, of course, they are. And he's going to sign it into law, 5 p.m. Eastern Time on the 4th of July, as we said, the nation's birthday. And as always with this presidency, it's all about the visuals. It's all about the messaging. America first. You know, you couldn't make it up. You couldn't have planned it so perfectly. That is why he wanted it all to happen today, so that he can seize on the sort of optics of this for him, for his supporters, for the right of this country. It's a big win.
Yeah, and for the Democrats, they are framing this as the big, beautiful betrayal and say it represents tax cuts for billionaires and the biggest slash to free healthcare in decades. We've talked a lot about America. Let's talk a little about foreign policy and Eden Alexander, the former Israeli-American hostage held by Hamas. He was in the White House today with Donald Trump. Now, Melania was also there, it's worth noting. Quite rare that we see her next to the president these days. Eden Alexander was, of course, released in May after 584 days in captivity. A hellish experience. And as you were saying yesterday, Mark, the decision to release him was framed as a goodwill gesture to Trump by the terrorist group. We saw a clip of Alexander's visit to the Oval Office, and in that he said he was given better treatment by Hamas when it was announced that Trump had won the presidency.
It was Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's Middle East envoy, who asked Eden Alexander in the Oval Office setting. He said to him, tell the president how Hamas's treatment of you changed after you won the election. And Eden Alexander then said, yeah, my treatment got better. And then that was framed in the Oval Office moment as you know, Hamas is scared of Trump, and so they will have to treat the hostages better. I think there's probably another way to look at it, and I think what happened is that Hamas recognized that Trump might be able to deliver a deal on Gaza, a ceasefire, yes, but a deal that maybe will stop the fighting and will, in some ways, benefit Hamas. He was able to deliver that deal potentially in a way that Joe Biden could not. And part of this, I think, is a Hamas recognition that Trump actually has some control over Netanyahu in a way, the Israeli prime minister, in a way that Joe Biden didn't.
Of course, the US designates Hamas as a terrorist group, but it was interesting to hear from Eden Alexander that even as a hostage, he noticed a shift. Mark, tell us what you know about what's going on behind the scenes regarding a ceasefire.
Well, yeah, I've spoken to a few people over the course of the past 24 hours who are involved in the negotiations, and I think it's fair to say that there is a level of optimism now for a breakthrough, optimism that we've not seen before now. I think, it's worth saying that at the time of recording, we're still waiting for Hamas to respond to the latest proposal put forward by the Israelis. By the time you listen to this, perhaps they will have responded. Maybe this won't date well, but I do sense that right now there is optimism. Qatar, as we know, has been a key in trying to build a bridge between that divides the two sides. The key sticking points are on the ceasefire language. As I said, Hamas wants it to be permanent. The Israelis are talking about 60 days. A real issue with the humanitarian mechanism as well. We know that the Americans are kind of running, an American organization backed by Israel is running the humanitarian access into Gaza. It's a bit of a disaster. Hamas says it's just not working at the moment. The Israelis say, well, that's because Hamas are trying to derail it, trying to undermine it. And then the other issue is the language on what Gaza looks like afterwards, the future of Gaza, the governance of Gaza, the future of Hamas. The language there is all important. Both sides will need to agree to that. So a way to go. But as I say, some optimism where perhaps before there was not.
And in addition to that meeting in the Oval Office today, Trump had another call with Vladimir Putin to digest.
He did, yeah. We didn't expect that this was going to happen today. It just got announced, guess where? Truth Social, of course. Trump said, I am speaking to the president of Russia at 10 a.m.
Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Yes, exactly. And so they did. They spoke for around about an hour. We're still waiting for a more substantial readout, as it's known, from the White House, their assessment of how the call went. But we have heard from the Kremlin.
Yes, the Russians told us that while Donald Trump pushed for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine, and he just said as he boarded Air Force One, he's not happy about the situation there, Putin said they still need to solve the conflict's root causes, but are willing to negotiate. As we said on the podcast earlier in the week, the White House has paused some weapons shipments to Ukraine, and Vladimir Zelensky's been trying to get some clarity on why that's the case. Astonishingly, in the Russian readout of the call today, it sounds like the two leaders didn't even discuss that.
Which is astonishing. There's a bit of confusion over this. As Trump was getting on the plane just before we started recording this, he was asked about this pause of weapons to Ukraine. And his response was, and I'm quoting here, "We haven't." And then he said, Biden emptied out our whole country. We've got to make sure we have enough for ourselves. So I think to sort of work out what he means there, he's suggesting that actually they haven't stopped supplying weapons to Ukraine. But then in the same breath, he's also saying that under the Biden administration, a lot of weapons were sent. So the American stockpiles were running very low. And, he's making the point that many military figures would agree with, that you've got to make sure your own stocks are not emptied out. But so there's a little bit of ambiguity there. It's not quite clear where we are on American weapons supplies to Ukraine. Maybe we'll get some clarity in the days ahead. But one thing I was struck by, David, in the Kremlin readout of that call, in their summary of it, a Kremlin official said, and I'm quoting here, the conversation between the presidents, as always, was on the same page, frank and substantive. The presidents will naturally continue their dialogue in the near future. On the same page. If that's true, that's kind of pretty chilling for Ukraine, the idea that the Russians and the Americans would be on the same page. Let's see. It's interesting that Trump's interpretation of the call, again, in his words on the tarmac, he said, I didn't make any progress with him at all today.
That's all we've got time for on today's episode. If you want to get in touch, you can do so at trump100@sky.uk, and there will be a Q&A episode for you on Monday.
Yeah, there will indeed. Hit the follow button to keep up to date with the podcast wherever you are listening. Leave a comment, tell a friend, get in touch with us on social media if you want to. I'm Stone_Sky News, David.
At Sky David Blevins on all socials.
And we will see you for another week of Trump 100 next week. Happy 4th. That's what they say here.
Enjoy the fireworks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.